is my co-host Levi.
Hello.
This is episode 11, and we're going to be talking about myths and misconceptions about maladaptive daydreaming. So to talk about that today, we have Sarcasm Nymph, 26, Amelia, 20, Red Halo, I don't know, probably 20-something, all from America.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi there.
Jump right into it, Levi.
Oh, cool. I was just thinking, oh, damn, and am I legit the only non-American here?
Yeah, today you are.
Damn. Cool. Well, right. So the first question, the misconception that maladaptive daydreaming is normal and that everyone daydreams. And that's something that I've heard quite a lot when I told people about maladaptive daydreaming, because they'd reply with, "Oh, so they call daydreaming a disorder now," or something like that. So, yeah, what's your opinions on that?
So, I mean, I kind of get where that comes from. I do. You don't want to make something that is normal into something like, pathologize it and make it into a disease. But at the same time, I feel like I kind of get irritated with this particular one specifically because it's like, I think it comes from a place of like, they're not actually listening to what you're saying. Like, most people who have maladaptive daydreaming know that a normal amount of daydreaming is fine. None of us think that, oh, we should just get rid of daydreaming altogether. Nobody should ever do it. It's the extent of it, how much it affects our lives, and how exhausting can it be that really affects us. So I think this is more of a listening comprehension problem that I think I've heard it from like four people that I've told. My friends, my mother had that reaction initially, like everybody. And it is I don't know. I don't know why it is like so prevalent. But yeah, it is. I think at the end it's a listening comprehension problem.
I agree. I think part of it is also a inability to really either empathize or really understand what exactly is going on with a maladaptive daydreamer. So I think people will try to like, oh, that's normal. That's not like they can't quite make the connection of like why someone would daydream to this extent or like what exactly is the matter. So instead of kind of sitting down and listening like you were saying, they kind of try to pass it off or downplay it as something that is more normal than it actually is. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with both of those points, and I think a lot of people, if they have no knowledge of what maladaptive daydreaming is and don't do it themselves, I think many of them also don't understand the difference between immersive daydreaming and regular daydreaming. So then they kind of think, oh, you daydream, I kind of do that too, and they don't really know about the going in immersively. Many of us go into like trance-like states. We kind of go with repetitive movements and music. It's they don't really have an understanding of what it is and the differences and how that they react. I know many people are kind of react to it. They say, "Oh, it's just daydreaming. It's." I do that too. But then some people, when they hear about the other symptoms, I've also heard many people kind of go in the opposite direction, and they think, "Oh, it must be like schizophrenia," or "Oh, it must be something dangerous if you're always like going into a trance and you're walking around mumbling to yourself, daydreaming." I see it's kind of the people that you talk to. It's kind of how much do they understand mental illness, how open and accepting they are of certain things, and how knowledgeable they are. I think that all of that kind of plays a role in how people understand and accept it.
Exactly.
So next, it's kind of the connection between maladaptive daydreaming and trauma, because there is a connection there. But what we see a lot of people say, maladaptive daydreamers themselves included, is that maladaptive daydreaming is almost exclusively caused by trauma. That it always comes up as a coping skill for a trauma.
This one's kind of a tough one for me because like neglect is a form of trauma, and I feel like I've experienced a lot of like neglect in my like youth and stuff, which probably has reinforced this, has made it worse. But yeah, literally, I remember my mom kind of telling me when I was asking her about this at some point. Like I asked her like, when did I like start doing this? Like when did I start like pacing or like doing these kind of because I'm very mobile when I daydream. I move around a lot. Like when did I do this stuff? And she was literally like, ever since you were like able to move, basically, since you were like a little kid, you've always done this. So yeah, like it's not trauma does play a big part, and I can see why people would kind of confuse it and muddle it together. And I think it in a way it almost kind of similar with the neglect stuff because you try to isolate yourself so much, you kind of end up hurting yourself in a way because you seek out isolation so you can daydream, and that kind of it creates this really dangerous cycle. But yeah, I think it's just it's not exclusively trauma related.
Yeah, I agree with all those points. I think it's also tough, like they said, it is in some cases, but then for many other people it isn't. So it's not necessarily like that claim's untrue, but it's only true in certain cases. And I think a lot of people, whenever they have, I see it in maladaptive daydreaming quite a bit, where people say all maladaptive daydreamers do X, but in reality, it's kind of only some do in a certain way, but then others kind of it manifests in slightly different ways. So I think it's one of those where people throw out blanket statements because it's how they experience it, but it wouldn't necessarily be how other people experience it too.
I mean, I agree with all those points. I mean, part of it is also trauma can be really hidden. A lot of people don't realize they've been through trauma until something brings it up. And I think sometimes maladaptive daydreaming can be the beginning of that conversation. And so it gets linked to trauma. And the other part is also there's just so little research. We don't know enough about the disorder to really make any grand claims yet. So a lot of people latch on to the idea of, oh, it's probably just a coping mechanism, or oh, it's just trauma did this, but it's generalizing a huge mental condition that we still don't know so much about. I think a lot of it just comes from confusion. It's understandable.
Yeah, I feel that, a lot of people, like, I agree with all the other points, and, you know, a lot of people feel like they know mental health when they really don't. Um, especially if they're not the ones who have to deal with it. So, yeah, I do agree with that as well. Cool. And then, oh, okay. So this is more within the community itself, where there's a misconception that maladaptive daydreaming, the contents that we daydream are always like include complex paracosms. And for some people, they don't have paras, they don't have paracosms, and stuff like that. So
I think it's partially because it's kind of the loudest people in the room are often the ones of us that kind of have the paracosms. If you're kind of daydreaming about your everyday life, I don't think it gets as much attention as the people that talk about their grand worlds and characters and certain experiences. There are a lot of people that just daydream about their crush or about celebrities or daydream in music videos or award speeches on shows. There are so many other things, but I think that it just gets more attention for the original daydream worlds or paracosms, and I just think that they get more attention, and those are the people that talk the most about them on Reddit and other places. Um, that's at least what I think of the situation.
I mean, I personally do have very, in-depth paracosms, but I think part of that is just, that's just, my brain, how that developed those daydreams. And like Halo said, you're more likely to talk about it if you have more in-depth daydream cycles. But I've definitely met a lot of people in our community who have very, either their daydreams aren't, in a paracosm at all. And I feel like we should describe the word for people who don't know. Paracosms are basically imaginary worlds or worlds that we set our daydreams in. And I've definitely heard from people who have don't have any paracosms at all. Their daydreams are intense, vivid, but very grounded in real life. So I think it's just it's a lot, fascinating to talk about worlds that are, separate from our own than just, daydreams in real life. So I think it's just the interest too, like it piques our curiosity. It's like, oh, what is that like? So, it gets talked about more, and then it becomes an assumption that everybody does that, which is not at all the case.
That's always been my theory on that one too. That the people with big fantasy like paracosms are just more talkative about it because it's less embarrassing than like talking about how you're dating Beyonce, you know?
Yeah.
That's not embarrassing. That's awesome.
In kind of the same vein, uh, the misconception that or myth that all MDers have, whatever symptom, just sort of insert almost any symptom in there. A really common one is like pacing, because pacing is really common.
But not everybody does it.
It's such a spectrum of how this manifests. It's honestly just it's awesome, but also it's just so confusing because yeah, like some people pace, some people don't. Some people like yeah, they have these hugely complex worlds, like almost like planet-sized worlds that they just have created, and other people it's like just about, you know, how they're like they think about their day and they daydream about like you're saying celebrities or, you know, crushes and interactions with real people. Um I kind of have both. Uh it's like my brain just kind of can't turn off anymore. I used to be mostly just like other paracosms, but it's kind of bled into everyday life as well later on. Um, but yeah, like it's such a diverse array of how this manifests, and it's just it's awesome and sad at the same time, just because it's so hard to put a pin on anything because it's so everyone experiences it differently.
What a definition for it, though. Maladaptive daydreaming is awesome and sad. I think that kind of suits it pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the a lot of people have many different symptoms. For instance, one of the most common is also you mentioned pacing is also music. Almost everybody I listen to when they daydream, they like to listen to music. It helps them get more immersed in everything else. Personally, it kicked me out of the daydream, and it was harder to focus on it because I was busy listening to the lyrics and the beat and everything else. So I would usually listen to just nothing. I would just daydream to silence. And I find so many other people that do that too. Instead of pacing, they have other repetitive movements or certain people they also have they don't have trauma. Some people they don't have the attention issues or the other certain other comorbid issues that they have. It can manifest in such different ways that it is pretty wide encompassing.
I mean, the other thing is, a lot of, I think, disorders, and again, I'm not an expert, but as far as I have seen, OCDs, ADHD, nobody has all of the symptoms or those, common known symptoms. Um, but there are diagnostic tools out there for those conditions, so you can tell who has it, who doesn't, and obviously professionals trained on it. But with maladaptive daydreaming, because it's such a new condition and there are no diagnostic tools, we all just kind of have to guess. And so we're constantly doubting ourselves. And it's like, wait, I don't do this. Does that mean I don't have it? You know? And that leads to a lot of, myths and and sometimes gatekeeping too, which sucks. Um, and I think it's just like it's really hard for us to judge for ourselves because there's no official way to really know.
To add, I'd forgotten to mention, I feel like there's a certain flexibility as well
Mm.
with the symptoms. Kind of how, like for example, let's say you daydream a lot when you're on the swings, and this actually happened to me as a kid. I would swing on the swing so much I actually broke them, and like I broke the swing and I couldn't swing on it anymore. So I would move on to another. Like it took me a little bit of time, but I would adapt to my own environment and find a way to daydream, like using different tools around me. Like sometimes I would ride my bike, um, and then other times I'd swing or like, and then I would pace. So it's kind of like there's a certain level of adaptability as well, because like you may not always have this one symptom. It might change into something else if you are no longer given access to that outlet.
Absolutely. No, I've definitely experienced that. Like, I've definitely personally done that. I used to, have a really hard time daydreaming without music. And eventually, I think for some time, I had to go without music because I lost my headphones. And I
Mhm.
was traveling. And for like 3 weeks, I couldn't daydream without. And then eventually, I just adapted to daydreaming without music and in complete silence. Because, like, I needed that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's also very like adaptable, which makes it frustrating.
The next one, which is also, well, this is kind of interesting because I've heard this from outside of the maladaptive daydreaming community and from inside, where people say that maladaptive daydreamers should quit daydreaming completely to be healthy. Uh,
Mm.
what do you guys think about that?
Oh, it's a tricky one. Um, it's honestly, I think it's a difference between what you should and what some people have tried and worked for them. Like if you can quit daydreaming and it works for you and you are able to control it and live a healthy life, go ahead. I'm not gonna stop you. But I had taken issue with treating it as a blanket advice for every single person as if that's the only right solution. And I've definitely seen that a lot in the community and outside. Lots of blog articles tell you to do that. And I don't think that's healthy because daydreaming, as and we brought up earlier in this podcast, is a healthy thing to do. Most people do it, and it is, it helps you process things. It elevates mood. So completely taking that away from your life seems extreme if that's not what you want. That being said, it's the thing that some people need to make themselves, more in control and make their lives better. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I think it's a personal thing.
I'll agree that it's a personal thing for a lot of people. I think it varies depending on, I guess, what people use their MD for. Because for me, like, yes, it is kind of a coping mechanism. It's kind of a way to process things and kind of ruminate on, emotions or reflect. But I want to try to use it for my creative pursuits. I'm an artist, and you know, I can visualize stuff really well, like when I'm daydreaming. The problem is being able to sit down and actually make it, because I'm so busy, like daydreaming. I never get to put the stuff in my head on paper. And no, it doesn't. This is another question that we'll get to, but it doesn't make you more creative. You're not a more creative person if you have MD. But it's just a tool, that
Right.
could be used. Yeah. Um, I want to gain the discipline to control. I don't want to stop it, because I want to be able to control it and use it in a way that is healthy and beneficial for me.
Personally, I think that it's also the difference between regular daydreaming and immersively daydreaming.
Right.
Many people live happy and productive lives. They don't immersively daydream at all, and they can still think and they can still daydream and kind of live happy lives. So I think that it's uh, personally, I'm immersively daydreaming a lot less, probably from in the past 5 to 8 to more hours a day. If that's not even considering how much I was doing it in the back of my mind while doing other tasks, to now about 10 to 15 minutes a day. And I'm content with this in my life, and in the future I'll try to dabble into it more once I kind of get over more of my maladaptation, my maladaptive tendencies, and it kind of and also still the addiction. So I'm planning in the future probably going to dabble in it a bit more again once it's kind of healthy for me to do so. But I think that there's also kind of a healthy balance, just like sarcasm had said, it kind of depends on the person. Right now, I'm kind of happy where I'm at, and I'm finally able to focus more, get more things done, have more energy, ever since I dropped the amount of time that I spend immersively daydreaming quite a bit. And I can still regularly daydream and still think about my daydream worlds and paracosms and other things normally without getting really into that really deep immersive state. And it's like I'm gaining about 5 to 6 hours a day. It's like all of a sudden I just have so much more time, and I think I'm happy where I'm at currently, but yeah, it depends on the person.
And I think kind of related is that with how people experience maladaptive daydreaming, and it kind of relates, I think, back to the first thing that like it's normal and everyone does it. Is that maladaptive daydreaming is an inherently positive experience. How often do we see that? No, it's a gift kind of
Oh
thing.
my god.
Yeah, I don't know where that comes from. Well, I guess from the nature of daydreaming itself as pleasurable, which it is, but it kind of goes into the MD doesn't really have any negative qualities. It's just our outlook or something that's making it a problem.
Yeah. I think part of that comes from daydreaming in like as most people know it is a positive experience. And I feel like for quite a few MDers the immersive daydreaming is positive because it's about like it's kind of reconnecting with your like feeling and your your thoughts and your emotion, when you when you're really into that immersive daydreaming, it's like the only word I can describe is passion. It's just so passionate that once you kind of experience that, you don't want to let it go. And I think that's where the danger comes in, is that it's almost like an addiction. You're always trying to get back to and it's that pursuit of it that is so dangerous, or not, I guess dangerous, because it can damage your health, and it really messes with people more than people like to admit. And because it's so much in your head, you can't it's hard to relate to people. It's hard to relay what is going on to other people. So it's kind of most of the I feel like a lot of MDers just kind of suffer with it quietly. They don't want to share this stuff with other people because it's embarrassing. It's you're just opening up all this personal stuff, because paracosms and all of these things are very personal. That's hard to share for a lot of people, and I don't know where I was going with that.
I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I mean, my mom actually had that exact response when I first told her. It's like, "Oh, you're so creative. That's a gift. You should use that creativity to do whatever, whatever." And it's like, there's that notion, I think you touched on that earlier, of it is if you're a maladaptive daydreamer, that automatically means you have like, really creative personality. And that might be true for some people, but it's not a given.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, sure, I might be creating these creative worlds in my head, but if I'm not producing anything, if I'm not,
Yeah.
writing it down, painting it, I'm wasting my time in my head. I'm not actually producing
Mhm.
anything, out of it. So at the end of the day, it's still hurting my time.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's like a narrow view at it, like there's so many hidden ways it can affect you that even you yourself don't realize until you look at it. Like the time wasting, right? You don't notice until you wasted like hours and hours for years. And you're like, oh my God, and it dawns on you.
And the
Can be
physical
like
toll too. It
that,
like it
yeah.
hurts your legs, or if you're a pacer, depending on what you do, it can
Oh
hurt
yeah,
your
no,
body.
I have so many corns on my legs because of the
Yeah.
daydreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think part of it is that there are certain people with immersively daydream, but it doesn't really negatively affect their lives. So then they're pointing out, hey, it's fine for me, it should be fine for you too, but they're kind of aren't really empathetically understanding that it is becoming a problem for other people. Because oftentimes maladaptive daydreaming, once it becomes maladaptive, it's often comorbid with like a whole bunch of really bad things along with it, like ADHD, depression, social anxiety, OCD, and a number of other things are very, very common with maladaptive daydreaming. It has a lot of negatives that a lot of people don't seem to realize that are connected. And also, I see that a lot of when people research it, also they kind of go onto different websites, blogs, or YouTube channels that are sometimes to be just honest, sometimes some of them are just putting out misinformation or are putting out their own experiences or opinions as fact. And once that happens on a few big YouTube channels or blogs or whatnot, sometimes those are shared and that they use that as sources in certain infographics. Then it's put into different TikToks, and other people are posting about it too. And sometimes opinions and myths get sourced back and forth in such a way that eventually it becomes hard to distinguish fact from fiction for a lot of people trying to research it for the first time.
Yeah.
So the next one is you can be diagnosed with maladaptive daydreaming. And it's actually funny because I see this one a lot on websites like TikTok and like Twitter, where people are like, "Oh, I just got diagnosed with maladaptive daydreaming."
My
But
God.
then I'm like, can you tell me more? Who diagnosed you? Just for information or whatever. And of course, people can never tell me. So
Mhm.
yeah, do any of you have any experiences with this?
Sadly, I don't because I have not really gone to any kind of any mental health like related professionals just for anything in general just because I haven't really been able to. Um, I intend to at some point in the future, hopefully soon, but I'm not even sure if I would bring it up with them because I don't think they would, like you're saying, it's not an official diagnosable disorder. So I'm not sure if professionals would even take it very seriously. Um I don't know. This one is just a big question mark for me, unfortunately.
I mean, for me, I've talked to two therapists and told them both about it, and they've had to look into it, and they're like, "Oh, that is fascinating." None of them, obviously say, "Oh yeah, you have this," because again, diagnosable. There, we do have a diagnostic scale now, but again, no mental health professional can technically diagnose you as of this moment.
Mhm.
They can't because it's not a diagnosable condition yet. Um, so yeah, I always find it very suspicious when people say that they have been diagnosed because I've talked to two therapists about it, and they're very supportive and kind, and they do try to help me with it, but they can't.
Yeah.
Um, but I've seen a lot of posts on the subreddit and even on the Discord channel where people are like, "Do I have this? Can someone tell me?" And that's always such an awkward conversation to have because it's like, we can't tell you. You have to sort of at this moment know for yourself, kind of guess, you
Mhm.
know? And it's weird because it's like you don't want to mislead people, but you also don't want to, um force this on someone. It's like, oh, you definitely have this for sure. If you daydream so many hours a week, you have it. It's like you can't. Um, and I think a lot of people are just desperate for a diagnosis because it's like they want to know what's wrong so
Yeah.
that they can do something to fix it. And so they latch onto it without any official.
Mhm.
Yeah, until we have like something concrete, this is gonna be a problem.
And I think a lot of people I think a lot of people are worried as well that like if they talk about it as if they have it, like not like I'm totally diagnosed with this, guys. Like I mean more of like they discuss MD and they're like I have this thing. Um I feel like a lot of people are also worried that they'll be like, "Oh, you're just saying that for attention because it's not a real thing." You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's not official, so, you're just you're making this up for attention or
Oh,
whatever.
definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, people with mental disorders already get that, even if they have a
Mhm.
diagnosis. So forget about a
Exactly.
condition, you can't.
Yeah.
Maladaptive daydreaming was only kind of recently coined by Dr. Sommer in what, 2002 or so, 2001, 2002, and then it was
Right.
kind of put on the back burner for like nearly a decade until they started just working on it like in the last 10 years, more and more. So it's still relatively new, and it takes a while for something to become an official disorder. So it's technically not an official disorder yet, and since it's not official, you can't really get diagnosed with it yet and get medication like certain other famous disorders. So
Mhm.
I'm still hoping that one day it'll be in the future. But yeah, for people that are listening, as of recording, it's not official. It's not an official disorder yet.
And kind of on the topic of diagnosis, like it comes up what is it, you know? And we see a lot of people inside and outside the community thinking that maladaptive daydreaming is just excessive daydreaming. It's just synonymous with daydreaming a lot.
Yeah. I think because the concept of immersive daydreaming is, I think Red Halo was talking about this a little earlier. Um it's it's hard to understand if you don't experience it, because it's a unique phenomenon. And I think a lot of people that again don't experience it just don't quite understand what that means, and they're just like, oh, it just means that you daydream like I do a lot. You're just doing it like for hours instead of 30 minutes.
I mean, and this is the flip side of it too. Like my therapist was wondering, it's like, do you don't dissociate, right? And then we had to figure out, well, is it dissociation or not? And then turns out it's not. But there's also that line, and it's like it's somewhere in the middle gray area where, and it seems to be that you're either you do it or you don't. And like you're either born with the ability to daydream with that vivid capacity, or you don't. So it's like if you don't experience it, there's no way to tell you how it feels.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you tell people what, like how do you tell somebody who's blind what red is?
Mhm.
That kind of problem.
I guess I also would just want to mention another misconception I just thought of now with maladaptive daydreaming. I see some people that, because it's connected with so many different comorbid disorders, with so many other issues, sometimes many of us are kind of desperate for solutions or things to help us. And sometimes people do get help in certain ways, or certain treatments help them a lot. So then they kind of, online, I see a lot of claims where a certain medication or a certain supplement or a certain other thing, they say that it's this dramatically helped me, and this is what people should do if they have maladaptive daydream. For instance, I know some people talk about philosophy really helps them in trying to understand themselves. And I've heard certain people say that it's many of their symptoms were helped with magnesium or certain vitamin D3 and other kind of stuff. But other people, they get almost little to no benefit at all from that. Same as therapy, certain types of therapy, certain types of other treatments, meditation, journaling. It's it seems to be that right now, while it's still fairly early, many of the treatments still seem to be kind of in a phase where it's kind of hit or miss for people. But I kind of see, if it hits for people, I see some people just claim them as hits. Like, oh, if you daydream to get over it and to get better, you need to journal. When in reality, it's not as clear cut or simple as that.
Hmm.
That makes me think of like I just had a random thought as well. I trying to think of how to word it, because what you were saying, Halo, made me think of all the times that I've seen maladaptive daydreaming downplayed. And again, by maladaptive daydreamers themselves and from the wider, just general population, where they'll be like, it comes up in a lot of ways that maladaptive daydreaming is not so bad. Oh, I have this, but at least I'm not a junkie or an alcoholic or something like that. That it's just not a big deal. And from the general population, we see it a lot in sort of the ways that they kind of say, well, just do this, just do that, or
Hmm.
just stop even.
I hear a lot from my family that it's exclusively a willpower issue.
Oh my
Which,
god.
yeah, like willpower does come into play, like that is a part of it. You have to discipline yourself in order to overcome, this kind of stuff, in order to control it. But it's not just about willpower. Like there's more at play going on. I'm not lazy, or I'm not just, yeah, yeah. It's not just willpower.
Yep.
Yeah, many other addictions definitely have more visible signs. If somebody's
Hmm.
addicted to certain kind of drugs, they have bottles laying around or scars. Or if somebody has like a eating addiction or bulimia or some kind of thing where they're staying away from food, there are obvious signs when somebody is addicted to something. Somebody's gambling. It might be the lack of money or piles and piles of scratched up lottery tickets. When somebody's addicted to daydreaming, it doesn't really have those outward signs other than, say, the other comorbid disorders and the procrastination and whatnot, but it's not like you have physical scars that come from it. So I think it's also easier for people that don't have it to overlook sometimes.
Yeah. And whatever physical like things that happen to the person can be kind of easily overlooked, like problems with like knees or like feet or legs and stuff. I think a lot of people wouldn't make that connection because I think, like we were saying before, a lot of people keep this stuff kind of hidden from other people. They don't know that the person is, you know, they don't know what's going on. And of course, I was just um talking about pacing with the leg stuff, but yeah, other it manifests in other ways too. Even for people that don't pace, it's even more invisible because yeah, like you're saying, there are no physical signs that something is wrong.
Yeah, I think yeah, basically everyone covered what my opinion on it is as well. But yeah, just to get back to I think what Nymph said earlier was that it just seems for people who don't have it, it just like to them it seems a lot easier to overcome something like excessive daydreaming and this whole thing when it's really not. Uh, so yeah, I don't really know what my point is, but I remember that came to mind. So cool. And then this is the final one on the list, which is daydreaming in the maladaptive daydreaming sense is always a visual experience. And some daydreamers have it auditory, so we can sort of hear things, or I don't know. I've even had people talk about how they experience temperatures in their daydreams and stuff like that. It's not always a visual experience.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I personally mostly visually heavy, but sometimes it's touch. Touch is a big one for me. Um I will try to simulate touch just to, like kind of put myself in that mind space. Um and I think pacing, the kinetic movements that I do is also part of that. Try to get my heart rate going to that level of excitement that I need to feel to be in that particular scenario in my head. So yeah, it's not always visual, but I guess visual is an easy thing to comprehend because daydreaming in your mind's eye um is a lot easy to like tell people. It's like, oh, I'm visualizing so and so, but it's a lot harder to communicate what you mean by, oh, I sometimes try to do it through touch or smell or auditory. It's like, wait, are you actually listening sounds, auditory hallucinations? No, but you're trying to kind of imagine it, I guess. um so it's a lot harder to explain. I think is the problem there. Same issue, really, just in a different form.
Yeah, my only issue with that sentence is the always. For many people, it's often visual, either in third person, first person, or some kind of blend. Most maladaptive daydreamers seem to have strong visuals or visuals in some form. So I've talked to some people here on the voice chat on the Discord server where they can't visualize their daydreams at all, but they're still maladaptive and they're still daydreaming constantly. It's more they know where characters are in their daydreams and they have emotional connections and they have other senses. But then some that don't have any visuals. So I think it's one of those over generalizations and kind of blanket statements where they kind of take it too far and then try to say that it always is this or that.
Yeah, it's the always like you're saying. It's the always that muddies everything up. Mine are very audio visual. I love to have the music. I don't have to have music, but I prefer to have music while I daydream. And it's very music video-y. It has that very like everything is kind of in time with the music and it has like yeah. I mine is very um audio visual. But I have quite a few where I just usually when I'm thinking about stuff like day-to-day stuff and not paracosm related things, there won't be any visuals at all. I'm just kind of thinking to myself, you know. So yeah, it's the always that muddies the message.
Yeah. I think I see this one like most often in the form of like, can someone with aphantasia have maladaptive daydreaming? And aphantasia, it's just where you can't sort of picture things in your mind's eye. And of course they can, because daydreaming doesn't have to be visual. And I know aphantasia, something like that, can be a little hard to wrap your head around, if you don't do it, sort of like MD is. But just think of blind people,
Mm-hmm.
or someone with a visual impairment, from birth or something. Like, what, you think they just don't daydream?
Yeah, they must use other senses. Yeah.
Yeah, it just pops up in other senses.
I remember this is a little bit off topic, but I remember I watched a video about a blind person talking about like how they dream, and it was literally, he's like, I just dream like everybody else, like, it's just with other senses, like he can hear it
Right.
and smell it and and feel it instead of just seeing. So I I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
We do have one that came up in the audience. It's just, oh god, it hits me right in all my pet peeves. MAD, MADD, is the only acceptable term, and everything else is wrong. The a myth the audience came up with.
Wait, who came up with that? What?
No, that's the myth.
No.
That's the
No, I
myth. I'm
know,
not
but
saying
that's
it's true.
stupid. No.
I've heard that a lot. Yeah.
I've heard it a lot
Honestly,
too.
I've also seen other terms where, because there are many different groups on social media, like, and sometimes I see a specific group kind of coining their own term, or somebody decides, okay, this is now a term for such and such, and then it'll be used in their community, and but it's not, nobody else uses it. I see a
Mhm.
lot of terms like that too that are just kind of floating around that some random people are using, but nobody else does, and it's just, I've seen maladaptive daydreaming people use MADD, MD, MDD. I've seen MAD, which makes even less sense. So I've seen, yeah, it can kind of manifest itself in many ways. People just kind of run with.
Yeah, and I get, wanting to come up with a vocabulary for your experience, especially when you feel like maybe one doesn't already exist. But it's the time. It's
It's
I
a
have
gatekeeping for me. Like you are the only one who gets to decide what the terms are called, and then nobody else has any. And if you don't call it this, then you're wrong. Like that to me.
and this probably sounds nitpicky, but I've seen people who are fairly prominent in the community. I don't want to name names, but fairly prominent content creators say things like MADD is the acronym. This is what it's called.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Oh my god.
I also see a lot of branch off things too with the para, for example, the para things, like the paras, the parames. It's generally a Tumblr term that generally became popular, though it's not usually used in any of the research papers or anything. I see other people
Okay.
also branching off of that with different forms of parames, and they have like longer words or different forms. I see it. It's kind of
I mean,
hard to
I think
keep up with
that's
all the things that
fine.
people are claiming too.
I think
There
as
are a
long as
lot
you
of
don't.
them.
Right, but I think as long as you're not saying like this is the only way to do it, and this is the official whatever.
Oh no, they are. I've talked to people now who have been saying if you don't call them paras, if you call them characters, it's dehumanizing to their paras, and then they get offended by it. I've seen people making that claim in different places now.
Okay, yeah, that
And
that I
as
take issue with.
yeah,
I
I do
don't get
too, as
that.
somebody who daydreams.
Literally all of mine, I almost always refer to them as just OCs. So like,
Right.
yeah, like what's going on?
I mean, I like to use para only because like I want to distinguish in my head between characters and those I made up for the daydreams, but that's a personal thing, right? Like
Yeah,
nobody has monopoly over what language you want to use.
yeah, like,
As long as you're not misusing medical terms.
mhm,
I don't like it how certain people kind of try to speak for the entire community. They say, this is the term that we're using, or if you don't say my term, then that's offensive to maladaptive daydreamers. When people make statements like that and try to act as if they're the mouthpiece for the community or people that have this as a whole, I think that really oversteps what they should say. It's fine if somebody says that's their subjective viewpoint for themselves, But I think it's another when people try to talk for everybody else, kind of as a group.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually, ironically enough, that is exactly what I wanted to touch upon because, the one thing that the maladaptive daydreaming community made me realize is how different we all are. It's not like this whole podcast is about this topic, is about how the way one person experiences MD might not be the same way that everyone does it. And that applies to the terms, like was mentioned before, is that if it's medical terms, then it's understandable. But I mean, like community terms, it doesn't matter, like it's why why is it a big deal? It just it's not important at all. But
Right.
yeah, it's just it's kind of a reminder, like this whole episode, but also this this very subject, is that we are different people and we have different lives and different experiences, and we're not like one giant hive mind of maladaptive daydreamers.
Yeah.
Like we each have our own thing going on, but it falls under the symptoms, the official proposed diagnostic criteria or whatever. But yeah, that's basically my opinion on it.
That that took us right to the end. So, if anybody else wants to bring up before Levi launches into the outro.
I just wanted to say thank you, to all of you guys for letting me on the podcast again. This is every time I come here, it's always a blast. I'm sorry I couldn't make it to the other one, however long ago, but that's okay.
Yeah, I always love doing these because it's always a nice conversation, and I love to
Yeah,
hear other people's point of views.
and everybody here is just so chill. It's just the best.
Aw.
So thank you guys. Yeah.
We love having you guys on. Like Levi said, this entire podcast is built around having different people with different experiences on, and every episode has a different set of people, and it would not work without the community being on board the way they are. It's amazing the response we've got.
Yeah, and like I always say, we really appreciate your time. And someone mentioned at the beginning of this episode that maladaptive daydreamers sort of feel uncomfortable to talk about these things because it's kind of, it's kind of embarrassing if we think about it. So having people come on here on this podcast and talk to us, and we can have a conversation and just relate to each other, it also makes other people out there feel less alone, and it lets them know that there are people out there that experiences similar issues. So yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
And right, so I need to do the outro. I legit promised myself that I was going to type it before we record again, and now look where we are.
I say that every week.
Yep. But yeah, thanks so much for listening. That is it for this episode. If you would like to get into contact with any of us, or if you would like to see where you can get a hold of more, maladaptive daydreaming content online, or join the Reddit, the Discord, you can check out the description on this video. And if you'd like to appear on the podcast, or if you'd like to be part of the audience, feel free to join the Discord, give yourself the podcast role, and yeah, then you can take part in the episodes whenever we record them, or you can sit in on the live recording. So yeah, that would be pretty cool. But yeah, that does it for now. Cheers. I think that's okay.
That was perfect. That was a really good one. This whole episode was really good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Yeah.
I've been recording in a Burger King the entire time, and I was stopping because I'm not home yet, and I got some weird looks at the guy in the booth over